Okay, so part two of our selections. Remember this one. This was the vegetables. And really, on this one, the basic selection tools like the rectangular marquee and the elliptical marquee, they're not going to cut it with this one. And the idea here was we took the lettuce, the carrot, the pepper, the tomato, and we put them onto the chopping board. So I'm going to start off, if you remember, with the lettuce. And the tool I'm going to use with the lettuce is the magic wand tool, because the magic wand tool allows you to select colour. And remember, it's not the green of the lettuce I'm really interested in, it's the white round about the lettuce, because when I make that selection, it's going to pick up that edge perfectly. The only problem is that there's a lot of white in the image and it goes in different places. So it was selecting too much white. Let me just deselect that, Control D or Command D. And instead, if you remember, what we did was we took the rectangular marquee tool to start with and we narrowed down the range within which we were making the selection by simply drawing a box over the area that we were wanting to use. And then this time, I'm going to use the, if I go up to Layer and New, and I'm going to make a new layer from that selection. But rather than use a copy, which would mean I still had the lettuce in the original, I'm going to choose Layer via Cut. Now what that does is it gives me two layers in the layers panel. It gives me a layer that contains the lettuce and a layer that has the background. Okay, so the lettuce is on its own now, and if you really want to concentrate on this, you can always switch the background layer off and just focus on the lettuce. And now if I take the magic wand tool and I click on the white that goes round about the lettuce, normally if you just want to select the lettuce you might invert it, but on this occasion, because we've taken this clean white selection round about the lettuce, I'm just as easy hitting the backspace key and just removing those pixels, and then Control D or Command D to deselect, and there's a really nice, quick and easy selection of something like a lettuce. It doesn't half help when you've got a nice white background behind it like that to make that selection. But there's my lettuce on its layer on its own, and now if I take my Move tool, pick it up and I drag it over here, I can drop it onto the chopping board, and that's that one done. And then we do the same with the tomato. If you remember that one, we did exactly the same as a practice with the tomato. Now, next we're going to focus on the carrot. And for the carrot, we're going to use our favourite magnetic lasso tool. If you remember that one, that was the one that was a pain. Right? That none of you like. But then when we're finished, you do like it and you realise that you were wrong and Photoshop was right after all. So what we're going to do, first of all, before we try and draw around this, is I always say to you, zoom in if you're looking at something in detail. Now when you're using the magnetic lasso tool or the magic wand tool, or in fact any tool at all, and you need to zoom in, you don't want to end up taking the zoom tool, zooming in and going back, especially with selection tools, because they have a habit of following you around the page, especially our friend the magnetic lasso. So the workflow for this, if you remember, was to use a keyboard shortcut to temporarily change the tool into a zoom tool, and then you could make the selection. And the keyboard shortcut was, on a Mac, spacebar and command. On a PC, spacebar and control. And it turns it into the zoom tool. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a box. In fact, no, that's the old version. I'm not going to draw a box. I'm just going to click to center that zoom. Actually, that didn't work very well because I started drawing a box. I'm still thinking of CS4. So try again. So it's spacebar and command. And I'm just going to click and hold as I click on the area I want to zoom in on. And you'll see like a space shuttle falling up the sky, we come flying in to land on our photograph. Now you don't want to hold on to the mouse button too long as you start to zoom. It's a bit like accelerating a car. Just go easy there. And when you let go, you come to a nice gradual stop. Not quite the right position. So if you remember, the space bar on its own gives you this dinky little hand tool, which allows you to pick your picture up and move it. And that's going to really come into help us when we get near the edge when we're making our selection. Now, the magnetic lasso tool is really something you need to practice with. And once you practice with it, if you remember, it can get really quite fast when it's making a selection. So I bring it down and I get its wee curly tail that's sticking down there, and I line it up with the edge of the carrot and the grey background so that it knows what it's looking for. And I click once, and once only, and that activates the tool. I've let go of the mouse now, and all I need to do now is just take the mouse and drag it around the outside edge of the carrot. And I'm not really trying, I'm actually just being, a bit loose and fancy free there without going mental. And the magnetic lasso tool is doing the work for me. Now, if you remember, I'm going to break it deliberately by extending just a bit too far so that it gives up trying to force its way back down to the orange or the carrot, but instead accepts my mistake of adding a bit too much of the grey. This is the only show I can show you again how to get rid of that. Come back to the carrot. Now, to control where the mouse is going to go next, sometimes you want to click. I managed not to that time. But again, just keep your hand relaxed. It makes it easier to draw. Now, here's where it gets tricky. And if you remember, the way to fix this, the way to move, is not take the mouse and start moving it around because the line follows you and you end up with this crazy selection. Press and hold spacebar to turn it into the hand tool. Move the picture using the hand tool into a position where you can see a bit more what's going on. And then before you let go of the hand tool, like if it's up here for example, it could be disastrous because the magnetic lasso will draw a line straight up there. Instead, you're going to come down and put it where it was before, where you finished off with your magnetic lasso tool. Release the spacebar and you're back at the magnetic lasso tool, and he's not tried to do anything silly, he's behaved himself, which is what we want. So we go around, you've got to treat him like a dog, right? Treat him nicely and show him who's boss. So we come around the corner. Now, it's not going to grab this bit of root that's sticking out the bottom. I quite like that. So this is where you click. You go click, 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 to force your way around that shape. And then I'm back to not clicking anymore, but letting the tool look after itself. Now, I'm also just going to break the bottom of the carrot here, and by not bringing in enough carrot, I have to actually work quite hard to force this tool to not do as it's told. Come to the edge, and again, spacebar, grab it, drag to the new position where you want to see things, and then make sure you leave it where it was, so that it continues and picks up from where it left off. That's such an important step to remember, and it makes your life so much easier. Now, I've got the little nub at the top of the carrot here. It's probably going to try and ignore that because it's not orange, so I'll just click a couple of times to force it to go around there, and then I come back to where I started from. Now, when I come back to where I've started from, what you should see is this little circle appears beside the tool to say it's complete. Sometimes, though, it doesn't quite get there, and it's a bit fiddly. So if it doesn't for you, and you know you need to close the path, try double-clicking with the mouse. Just go click, click, and it will turn into your marching ants going round about the carrot, quite the thing. And makes a really nice selection. Now, the only thing is these bits I broke. And if you remember, if you miss a bit with the magnetic lasso tool and you want to put it back in, then the options are, if you want to subtract an area, remove an area, like this bit here that's bulbing up, then you press the Alt key as you use the tool, because as you press the Alt key, what happens is you get a little minus beside the tool to say, oh yeah, you want me to remove something using the magnetic lasso tool. If you don't and you start clicking, it will make a new selection and abandon the old selection, and all that work you just did would be a waste. So start off in this section here, and I press, I'm going to go around the outside first, quite loosely, because that area is already deselected, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to go click, 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 click. Right, that gives me a zone around which all the selections will be removed. Okay, and then when I come down to the carrot, I'm just going to take my time and let the tool go along that carrot nice and smooth until I get the circle and it's closed again. Or you can double click. All the time I've got my finger on Alt. I haven't let go of Alt at all, and I won't. So now when I click on this to close it, it removes it. I still have Alt pressed and never can release Alt because it's done its job. If you let go of Alt at the wrong time, it turns into a new selection and you're snookered, basically. Now here's the section down here where I missed a bit of carrot. And if you remember, to add to your selection, Alt was to subtract from your selection. So to add to the selection, you press Shift. When you press Shift, you get a plus. And you do exactly the same thing, only this time the loose overlap area will be inside the selection because that part's already selected. So that just gives me a starting point for the area that will be added to the selection. And then I take my time along the edge of the carrot until I achieve a complete loop. Still keep my finger on Shift, and it's closed. Remember the keyboard shortcut to come back out, to zoom out again to a full screen so you can see the whole thing? It's Command or Control and 0 to take you back to 100% view. That's all you ever really need to do when you're zooming out, unless you just got a bit over exuberant, need to zoom out a little bit. Remember, use Control or Command minus. Just press those a couple of times. Command or Control and minus. So there's my caret. I'm going to make a selection, make a new layer from that selection like we did with the coin. So I'll go Control J or Command J. Oh, now there's a message. That's because, if you remember, you probably see this one yourself, I neglected to go back to my background layer, so that's very naughty of me. The caret is on the background layer, it's not on layer 1, so as far as it was concerned, I was trying to make a selection of nothing, because there's nothing in that section in layer 1. So I've got the background layer, Command or Control and J, and I get this new layer here that contains a caret, which if I take my Move tool, I can pick the caret up and pop it on there, and hello Mr. Caret, how are you doing? Now, this time I'm going to be a good boy, and I'm going to go back to the background layer, first time for everything, and we're going to use a different tool, and this is my personal favourite. We're going to use the Quick Selection tool. I'm on the pepper. Now, just so we can see what we're doing, let's zoom in again. So spacebar and Control or Command. Zoom in, and we'll see what we're doing. So I can see that pepper in a bit more detail. And this is where we start using the brush tool. And the important thing when you're using the brush tool is the size of the brush when you're using it for a selection. The keyboard shortcuts to change the size of the brush is, I don't know why, I can't hear what you're saying, sorry. Square bracket left, square bracket right. Right to grow, left to shrink. And so I'm going to bring that up until it's about yay big. Is that maybe about 1/8 of the whole size of the pepper, perhaps? Something along those lines. Now this is a combination of two tools. Remember, it's the magnetic lasso tool and the quick selection tool. So as I start to paint inside this pepper, like the magnetic lasso tool, as soon as it sees yellow, it says, all right, okay. And like the magic wand, when it sees the edge, it sucks onto it there. And you see how fast that was. Remember? Just click, and I didn't even actually have to move the mouse. I had the mouse the right size. If yours isn't quite the right size, paint it around a little bit and try and get as many different shades of yellow as you can included. But you don't have to go up to the edges unless you're absolutely desperate. But it makes such a clean selection of the pepper. And then I'm going to add the stalk of the pepper in, so I'll need to bring the brush size down. And the easiest way is to combine the two, is just paint from inside the yellow of the pepper up into the green. And again, it's pretty good at just recognising all that green. And it's sorted. If you've gone over the lines anywhere, remember, Alt will paint out. You can paint any selections back out. And if you missed a bit, just paint it back in again. Okay, done. Now, again, I'll go, well, let me just go Control or Command 0 so I can see the whole page. Make a new layer from that again. And I can stick my pepper in with the rest. Okay, now, you do a little bit of work with the transform tools and everything else to make them nice and tidy and so on and so forth. But it gives us a chance now to play with the layers a little bit. First thing to remember about the layers is if you want to change the layer order, just grab a layer and swap them around. You can see the black line in between them allows them to swap. And that allows then the sheets of acetate, if you like, to start swapping position. Let me move the caret there, move the pepper there. And so as I start swapping them around, you can see the caret comes on top. The lettuce goes on top of the pepper, put the lettuce on top of everything, and you can start to play around with your layer structure. But it's a bit of a pest that you have to keep selecting layers, remember? So instead, there's two options we can have. When you've got lots and lots of layers stacked up one on top of each other, if you right-click anywhere where that layer is, or where the object is, it'll give you a list of all the layers that contain content. You can select that layer, and then you can move an object, okay? Or a slightly easier option is press and hold Control or Command as you're clicking on the object you want to move. So I want to move the lettuce. Press and hold Control or Command, pick up the lettuce, and I've got it. Control Command, pick up the pepper, pick up the caret. Without that, I'm only picking up the caret no matter where I go. But if I press Control or Command, then I can pick the individual items up. And hey presto, you're starting to get control over your layers. Don't forget as well, naming your layers makes life so much easier in the long run when you come back to this in a month's time and you go, what on earth is layer 48? And what is layer 49? What is layer 162? God forbid. Okay, so that's using the selection tools, at least some of them anyway.